Welcome back to your live official continuing coverage of PhotoPlus 2015 here in New York City at the Jacob K. Javits Center on BeTerrific. You are the Terrifics. You make BeTerrific special. I missed you in the break. I know you missed us. Thank you so much for watching. We're also streaming live on PhotoPlusExpo.com and a lot of other syndication partners. Thank you for watching wherever you're watching. At BeTerrific TV on all social media. I'm so excited about our next guest. I just got to get right to it. I am honored and humbled to welcome our next guest. He is an amazing adventure photographer. He's also an unbelievable photographer and climber too, because he has to be an athlete to get what he does. He's skied Mount Everest. He's climbed the tallest and toughest and biggest peaks ever to get the most amazing footage and photos for you guys to see. He just finished a movie called Meru. Jimmy Chin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're an official member of the North Face team, and you just joined the Canon Explorers as well. I love that.
Yeah. No, I've been on the North Face athlete team for 15 years now, and I'm very excited to work with Canon.
What came first, your love of photography or your love of climbing?
I was a climber and a skier first.
Yeah.
And I discovered, photography kind of along the way while I was a climber, and started shooting basically my friends and peers who turned out to be world-class climbers and skiers, and became sponsored. So I really started by shooting them kind of for their sponsors.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. When you started out, what gear did you use?
When I first started out, I think the first camera I ever took a photo that was published with was like a Nikon FM3 or something like that. And then, I shot on slide and transparencies.
Wow.
And then kind of moved around the board. I've been shooting Canon for quite a while now.
I could imagine that it must have been really tough when you started, because you had to worry about so many things you didn't know until you got the photos back.
Yeah.
It's not like today, you take a photo, you look, wow, okay, that looked pretty good. You had all these other things you had to worry about.
Well, especially on expeditions.
Yeah.
Because we would, you'd shoot for 2 months, and you'd have no idea what you got for 2 months.
Wow.
And I carried them in Ziploc bags, the film.
You can't get water on them.
No.
Condensation,
So then you travel home, and then you take these 2 big bags of film, and you'd hand it in, and then it was like, wow. Wait,
And you couldn't go get more film on the mountaintop.
No. So I'd fly in with like 100 rolls of film.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would be so neurotic about that. That would totally freak me out. Talk about climbing for a minute. I mean, basically, to give everybody an idea, you're going up to these peaks that we might have seen in the movie Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone, but instead of being helicoptered, you're climbing up them.
Yeah, I mean,
climbing. And you're doing it with camera gear.
Yes. It's been quite a journey, because climbing itself was such a journey and something that I was really, really passionate about. And, I'm often asked, like, oh, what should I do if I'm starting as a photographer? And I'm always like, well, shoot what you're passionate about, shoot what you love, shoot what you're obsessed with, because that's kind of how I started, as I shot climbing, which was this thing that I was really obsessed with, And I had to have the climbing skills in order to kind of be up there to shoot, and that kind of separated me a little bit from the pack, I think.
I was at NAB a couple years ago, or 2 years ago,
yeah.
And Movi had come out with the Gimbal System.
Yeah.
Do you use that ever?
I've definitely used Movi quite a bit.
And so their shot of the year was this shot where they followed a skier going off a jump, and
Yeah.
a guy went off the jump with the skier,
Yeah.
holding the thing, and the frame doesn't move at all.
Yeah, I probably know him.
And I said that this is the most amazing shot. What people don't realize is that the skier had to do the jump and everything, and that's what people think is amazing. And they get fixed on that. They fixate on it when they see the actual footage. They don't realize that the guy behind him with the camera also had to go off that jump and stick it while shooting and moving the Movi and keeping him perfectly still in frame. And that's basically what you have to do. Is you know, you're climbing the mountain, you're holding on with one hand, you're roped up, and on the other hand, you have to take this amazing photograph or shoot this amazing cinema without messing up the shot. So in one way, you're really almost better than the guys who are doing the climbing that you're shooting and documenting.
I wouldn't say better, but I definitely
You're more
had to
challenged.
spend a lot of time marrying these two things, you know, because in the climbing you have a certain amount of bandwidth that you have to reserve to be a climber, to be safe, to not be a liability. And then you have to have a certain amount of bandwidth to shoot. So the more comfortable you are as a climber and the more time and experience you've had as a climber really allows you more bandwidth to be creative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so that's really the challenge, is that you have to be in good shape, you have to have a ton of experience, and that way when you're up there or getting up there, you have the bandwidth to actually shoot.
I like what you said about you have to shoot what you're passionate about, because number one, you can then have the bandwidth to shoot it, like you just said. Number two, you also are going to want to make your photographs better and better and better, and constantly achieve greater. And so I think that that's a very interesting way to look at it. And you know, a lot of people say shoot what you're passionate about, but when you say it, it really, I go, wow, you know, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just saying it, it actually adds up. What about Meru? Can you tell me about Meru? Some of this footage that you've shot is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm blown away. A lot of shallow depth of field, especially when people are putting their feet in certain spots, which is, I can only imagine, the most challenging thing to do when you're also climbing. But on the other hand, it really brings you in to the movie.
Well, I mean, by the time I shot Meru with my friend Renan, I've been doing this for 15 years, you know, and really Meru is kind of the culmination of all my experience as a filmmaker and photographer on expeditions and in climbs. So, you know, for me, it was really about shooting in a way that didn't disrupt the climb or slow down the climb, but still being thoughtful about shooting sequences and getting all the shots that you needed to build the scene. But even beyond that, the filming was really challenging, but for me, it was telling the story and weaving the story and creating the kind of emotional landscape for people to understand climbing in a different way. Like, I feel like in a lot of like the big mainstream films about climbing, they miss the point of it, and I wanted to share aspects of climbing that I thought were really important.
I like what you're saying, because when I watch things, I either think they hit it or they missed it, and when I feel like they missed it, I feel like, oh, if I was only there to ask the questions, especially when I watch documentaries.
Yeah.
And so I like that you took a different approach, and you felt that they had missed the mark, and you could do it differently, and captivate people, bring them in, and answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, it was because a lot of the things, you know, there's climbing and expeditions are such great metaphors for life, and I really wanted to get at the heart of why people climb, the relationships, the partnerships, the loyalty, things that are universal to people. And so in that way, hopefully bring this kind of really extreme, you know, endeavor to a place that the mainstream audience could kind of get it.
Right, because it is a very extreme sport, and it is something that you got extreme conditions, you've got to climb, and you have a very big risk of injury and death.
Yeah.
And so you have all these things going on, and a lot of people don't understand it because they can't relate, and it's a very tight-knit community, but it's nice to be able to make something that is mainstream and interesting to the mainstream.
Yeah, and I also wanted to show the vulnerability of that climbers aren't just crazy, you know, stuntmen, you know, that they're hyper calculated, and there's a lot of challenges that they face personally, and have a lot of internal conflict over, that I think a lot of people have in daily life, because it's really about ambition and sacrifice, you know, and everybody can relate to that. Like a businessman that leaves home for 200 days a year, you know, how do they justify their ambitions, you know?
Do you and the other climbers, do you worry about death? Do you think about injury? Do you fear it?
Yeah, I mean, we face it all the time, and in a lot of ways, I feel like, you know, so much of life you can get a perspective of life by, looking at death, and not in a morbid way. But I mean, we all kind of pretend it's not there, but that's one of the things that we all have in common,
Yeah.
There's an end, and when I think you're faced with it often, it gives you a different perspective on life that I think is helpful.
What has been your most challenging experience?
I would say probably, I've had a few. I mean, taking the leap to live a life as a photographer and a climber and a skier that was like such a non-traditional path. I mean, society kind of like, it pushes you in a certain direction, and it's
Absolutely.
safe. And I always think of life having two great risks. One being risking too much, which we examine a lot and we're always told to worry about. But the other risk is risking too little, and I think about that a lot.
You look for no regrets then?
I try not to, yeah.
What about adding the fact that now you shoot cinema and having to do cinema, photography, and
And
climb.
direct, yeah, and
and
climb.
direct, and that adds a lot to.
Yeah, it does. I like to stay focused on one thing nowadays, and I can put a crew together that I trust, that, if I'm directing, then I'll bring in a photographer. If I'm, being the photographer, I'll bring a good team in that I can direct on the side. But ultimately, there are trips where I have to do both, and that's challenging.
All right, so I imagine you use the Canon 5D Mark III. You're
Yes.
using probably the 1DC as well.
Yep.
What are you using for filmmaking? Are you using the 5D3, or are you going with the Cinema Series line, or a combination?
A combination, yeah. I use a combination. I love the Canon Cinema Primes. And, frankly, a lot of the harder access locations and more run and gun style filming on the Canon 5D. Most of Meru was shot on the 5D Mark II.
Wow.
And, that film's wide theatrical release. So it holds up.
No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
The stuff, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jimmy Chin,
Yeah.
National Geographic photographer. You're a Canon explorer. You're part of the North Face athletic team,
Yeah.
and so much more. You're unbelievable. You're a legend. Thank you for giving us a few minutes here on
Absolutely.
BeTerrific with your live official coverage of PhotoPlus Expo 2015. What a great guy and a great story. We'll be back with a whole lot more right after this. Don't go anywhere. You're the Terrifics. You make BeTerrific special.